It is 11:30. That means one thing. It is time to dive into all things people, power, and politics. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. We're talking with a public relations guru in a matter of a few minutes here about the president versus 60 Minutes. You heard about this one and how that's impacting a major media merger. We're also talking to a former U.S. attorney about the Department of Justice versus Google. The Trump administration wants to break it up. Is Google being greedy, and what could happen next in this case? And we're diving into the Signal scandal with a cyber risk expert, David Durajotis, on the dangers Pete Hegseth faces using that personal number in those infamous group chats. Also, though, he'll be talking about TikTok and how some very famous brands are trying to get into your phone. We'll explain how this will all work coming up here. And a lot of really smart people on the show tonight, and we'll get to them in just a few minutes, but now you have to deal with me for the next few. I'm joking. Right now, we want to run through some of the big stories that we're covering at this hour. A federal judge once again telling the Trump administration to tell her what they've done to bring this man back from an El Salvador prison. We've covered Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wrongful deportation extensively. He's been in prison for nearly 7 weeks now. The Trump administration's admitted an administrative error caused Abrego Garcia's deportation. And the president himself acknowledged last night on ABC News he could call the country's president and have him sent back. But he doubled down on claims Abrego Garcia is a gang member. His lawyers say the Trump administration has shown no evidence of that. The judge set a May deadline for the administration to show what they've done to bring him back. The Trump administration is looking to cancel $1 billion in mental health grants. They say it reflects priorities of the Biden administration. A gun violence bill signed by President Biden in 2022 sent the money to help schools hire more psychologists, counselors, and other mental health workers. But a new education department notice found they violate the purpose of civil rights law and go against the department's policy of prioritizing merit and fairness. Officials say they will find other ways to support mental health. And a deal reached between the U.S. and Ukraine, giving the U.S. access to its valuable rare minerals. This after calls by President Trump for Ukraine to compensate the U.S. for its military and economic help during the war with Russia. The minerals are used for everything from making aircraft wings to nuclear power and medical equipment. All right, now we want to turn back to the president's visit to Metro Detroit, particularly this moment between him and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Her relationship with him seemingly improving since the president took office again. So I asked her on The Pulse last night how she went from being that woman from Michigan to the president praising the job she's doing. In case you missed it, here's her answer.
I'm that same woman from Michigan, Roop. I don't know. Listen, my job is to fight for the people of Michigan, whether it is in the midst of a pandemic when I'm getting threats, or it is trying to get a fighter mission recapitalized at Selfridge and going to the Oval Office to get it done under the Trump administration. My North Star is the people of Michigan, and I'm really pleased that we were able to get this massive investment at Selfridge. It's such a big deal for the Michigan economy and for our men and women in uniform at Selfridge.
It's an interesting conversation. President Trump saying she's doing a fine job, she's a good person, yet so many of his followers on the right say she's awful and terrible. Yet he is coming back and really doubling down on how much he likes her. It's a fascinating conversation. You can watch the full interview as well as our recap and panel's reaction to President Trump's speech. Just scan the QR code on your screen. You can also watch every episode of The Pulse on fox2detroit.com and in the Fox local app. And so I ask you, how do you grade President Trump's first 100 days? No surprise, so many of you have a lot to say, including Talika Potter. I would give President Trump a failing grade, I think is what she meant, of FFF. Sue says, I'm very happy the border has finally been closed. I don't agree with everything Trump has done, but I'm proud of my decision to vote Republican. John says utter failure and a complete disaster, an F. Pierre says, I give President Trump's first 100 days a B+ for effort, but only a C- for results. Remain positive about the incoming administration and its policy changes. Give us your opinion as well. We always like to hear from you. Now to the president's battle with one of TV's longest running shows, 60 Minutes. We told you about Paramount's merger reportedly causing increased oversight at that show. That led to the executive producer resigning and a correspondent calling out the parent company on the air. Well, now there could be a settlement between Trump and Paramount. Public relations guru Matt Friedman is in Studio C to talk about all of this tonight. And Matt, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here. We both are former interns at this fine television station many, many moons ago.
Proud of that, too.
I'm proud of that. Proud of having you back in our Southfield studios. This is really interesting, Matt. Here we have this big kind of announcement on 60 Minutes from the anchor, Scott Pelley, who basically said, you know what, this EP said, I don't want any editorial oversight coming from any kind of a government influence at all. And in fear of that, I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm stepping down. Did I get that right?
Pretty much. What they're really afraid of is not just government influence, but corporate influence happening at the same time. And I get asked by clients and others when I try to talk to them about this, why should I care? As a viewer, as a citizen, why should you care? If there's any deterioration of rights for journalists, that could affect rights for the rest of us. We're all communicators. We send emails, we send texts, we post on social media, and we've lived in a society where the news has been able to report whatever it needs to up until certain legal points, and the government has not been able to interfere otherwise. If that changes because of a corporate merger, because of a settlement of a lawsuit that many experts believe is frivolous, that could affect everybody. We're all communicators.
Let's block out these two as separate for a moment here, even though they're very much part of the same story here. Mr. Trump himself is suing, at first it was $10 billion, a lawsuit against CBS, essentially saying that 60 Minutes deceptively edited an interview with Kamala Harris, his opponent at the time, to make her look better. And that's something that 60 Minutes says, look, we didn't do that to make her look better. We simply chose a different part of the interview to insert into that piece. When you look at that in itself, how much water do you think, from a messaging point of view, does this lawsuit have? And is a settlement likely?
They're in settlement talks, reportedly, so that probably means it's likely. But in terms of anything else, it's pretty preposterous. I have attorneys calling me. I'm not an attorney, but I've worked in the thick of media for so long that they call me when they have clients that think that they have a libel case. And the first question I always ask is to the attorney, what's the damage here? If there's no damage, the attorney and I usually agree that there probably is no case. So what could be the damage against somebody who is running for president and won, despite this story that he says had a problem? On the surface, it just doesn't make any sense. But CBS has a business imperative to make a deal here because they need the White House's approval to sell the company in the way that they want to.
And that's the second part of the story here,
yes.
Is the fact that you need, essentially the Trump administration has to approve, they're in charge of approving this merger. And so this EP, this executive producer, is saying, whoa, things are getting a little murky here in the waters.
And we have a Federal Communications Commission now that is threatening to take licenses away from companies that don't report the news the way that the majority on the commission likes it. That is to say, in the way that the White House and the president likes it. That's something we've never faced before. And so CBS, from a business perspective, is trying to do a couple of things. Number one, sell the company the way they want. Number two, keep their TV stations that they own around the country. And to do that, they are trying to stay on the good side of the White House, and that could affect their news coverage. We've never seen anything like this before.
And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you believe in the ethos of this country having a free press, being in so many people's regard, the fourth estate, whether you like the headlines or not, because certainly Biden and Kamala Harris get their share of slack, I guess you could say, from Fox News or perhaps Newsmax, but it is not imperative on an administration to try to control the media. That should be left independent. And that's kind of one of the tenets of how our whole system is run.
It is, and that could affect everything in communications, not just the media, but also public relations, advertising. And as I said a moment ago, all of us are communicators in our own ways. That's why we should be paying attention to this, and that's why we should be concerned.
Yeah, if you don't like something and you're in a position of leadership, oftentimes you just have to get uncomfortable and say, I don't like it, but that is what it is. And that is the risk you take when you run for big office. But listen, let's talk about Elon Musk here.
Yeah.
He's exiting in many ways his role, even though he's still a special government employee. He will only be spending a few days there. He has to get back to his day job. His day job, the Q1 earnings, there was a 71% drop in earnings for Tesla. There's some serious problems that he has to go tend to right now, and it's a PR nightmare.
Elon Musk is an interesting case study in how fragile a reputation can be. 4 years ago, next week, he was hosting Saturday Night Live. He was that popular and that culturally relevant. Look how that's flipped in 4 years. And look at how Tesla's fortunes have flipped in just a few months. His work with the Doge effort has been so unpopular. His favorability ratings are so low that it's affected his business. At the same time, he's been on the side politically that has been crusading against electric vehicles. He's in the business of electric vehicles. So there's some real irony there, too. Things are a real mess at Tesla right now. He's the face of the brand. And unlike a celebrity spokesperson, you can't just end the campaign. He's the founder and the CEO.
It's fascinating because you're right. During the actual campaign, President Trump would go into these rallies saying, nobody wants these EVs, nobody wants them. And all of a sudden, he changed and softened his tone when Musk came in and saying, if you want one, you should be able to get one. That was a quick pivot there for the president in terms of a message as well.
It was. Then, you know, you look at the hundreds of millions of dollars put into the campaign. I think a lot of people in this country are wondering what this was all about in the first place.
But we know what it's not about is political violence. And there's no room for that, I don't care on left or right, in terms of damaging these cars. But
yes.
It is quite a nightmare that he has to now go tend to, and that's what he'll do. Matt Friedman, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Anytime. Thanks, Rube.
Always great to have you. From a battle with one major media company to another, how the DOJ taking on Google could reshape the internet as we know it. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. Here to talk about the Department of Justice's battle with Google and some other tech. Former U.S. Attorney Matthew Schneider. Matthew, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us on The Pulse.
Thank you, Rube. Nice to be back.
Well, as we always joke on this show, there's nothing going on. So
yeah,
you can just
exactly.
go home. No, we have so much going on. And in this case, we're talking about tech. I find this fascinating because the first thing that we do when we have a question about something, most of us go on our phones and we go to Google and we say, hey, what's the deal with this or that? The U.S. government is saying, wait a minute here, there may be some issues. What are those issues?
So the issue is about antitrust, and that's a big word for anti-competition. And Google is at the center of this, and so is Apple and Facebook and a lot of other companies. Antitrust is really anti-competition against people that don't have lots of devices. For example, when you go into driving down the street and you see two gas stations, if one of them is $6 or $3 a gallon and one is $3.10 a gallon, you're going to go to the cheaper one, right? You're going to go to the $3 gallon instead of $3.10. Now, what if the same company owns both of these gas stations? They can jack the price up. What if that same company owns all of those gas stations in the state of Michigan or the United States? They can raise that gas to $6, $10, $12 a gallon, and that's anti-competition. That is what the government is essentially alleging that Google is doing. They are taking the reins away from the people who matter the most, and that's the consumer, the people who are purchasing these things.
And so I like the way you put that with the gas stations, because again, we can all relate to that.
Right.
But I do have the question about Google. How does that work with tech? I mean, gas I get, groceries I get,
yes.
Big companies, of course, but what about a search engine?
So the government has said two things about Google. Number one, on its web browser. When you go to your phone, you pull it up, and what do you look to do to search the internet? You find Google. Now, why is Google on your phone? The government has said they're on the phone because Google has paid off Apple, and they bought off all all the competition, and that's why you don't have Bing or DuckDuckGo on your phone. They've said that they've used anti-competitive strategies to get all of those other people out of the marketplace.
But if I go to my iPhone, for instance, I can go to Yahoo and download the app right away, and I can have it right there, right?
But when you buy the phone, Google is automatically installed, and most users aren't going to do that. They're just going to use what is available to them, and that is the whole structure of this case, that they have engineered it so that you don't have any other options right up front.
And I want to talk to you, we'll wrap this up in a few minutes here, talking about what will happen because of these complaints from the government. But we have another big tech to talk about, and that is Meta.
Yes.
They own Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. And the government is essentially using a similar argument with them, right?
Yes, they are, but that case is a little harder. What the government is saying is that Facebook or Meta, they bought Instagram, and they did that and WhatsApp at a time when their strategy was to knock everybody else out of the marketplace. And they felt that they feared competition from Instagram and from WhatsApp. And the government is saying the reason why they bought them is to make sure that they couldn't compete with them. The problem is this was over 10 years ago, right? These companies were not very valuable at the time. Facebook bought all kinds of different entities.
Sure.
These were just two of them. So I actually think that this is a difficult road for the government to hoe. This case is not as strong as the one against Google or the one against Apple.
Because at some point you can say, look, that was a really kind of astute or smart investment that was made early on by Meta.
That is exactly what they're saying. They're saying, we made a really good business decision to buy WhatsApp, and that was really smart at the time. So why are you punishing us? In fact, the government at that time approved of that sale. They allowed that to happen.
Which makes it even tougher for the DOJ to push back now.
That is true.
So what is it now? You know, I find it interesting because for so many years I've been covering these congressional hearings that happen. And you hear about a congressional hearing, and then oftentimes I wait as a news guy to say, what binding anything came from a congressional hearing?
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of that with big tech.
Yes.
What can likely come from some of these hearings that we're talking about in Washington?
So two types of hearings. One is those congressional hearings. Certainly the members of Congress can take that information and they can pass laws. They can regulate these industries. They can pass additional antitrust parameters to rein them in a little bit. And then you have the hearings in the courtroom, which we're going to be seeing right now with Google. You have a situation where the judge could say to Google, you're a monopolist, and they've said that, you're a monopolist. Now what do? We're going to order you to sell your browser, sell Chrome to somebody else. That's where it's going to have a tremendous impact if that actually takes place.
Well, you have an impressive resume, and anyone who wants to Google, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, or Bing, Matthew Schneider will find that. And bringing that expertise here on this set is so valuable to us. So we thank you so much, former U.S. Attorney
Happy
Matthew
to do
Schneider.
it. Thank you, Ruth.
Great to see you here on the show. A new layer to the Signal scandal. Pete Hegseth's personal phone number exposed online. The national security risks this could pose. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about Pete Hegseth using his personal phone number on the Signal account where those infamous group chats happen. Cyber risk expert David Derajotis. And we'll touch on that topic, but we really want to get to something that's going to affect all of us. If you buy things on TikTok, you're going to want to listen to this. Buyer beware for some really important information. That's coming up in just a moment here. But let's begin with this Signal gate, because I think it is important whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. We worry about what information out there can affect all of us. Talk about this personal phone number issue that we're seeing that was connected to the Signal app.
Yeah, Root, personal phone number can unlock so many details, especially for those that are in particular government areas or high-profile celebrities, whatever it may be. You're at risk. You can get phishing. People can get a hold of your personal information just starting with the phone number. So it's like a breadcrumb that leads to much larger bits of information.
And so we know that obviously Hegseth is accused in this case of using the Signal app and including other people in the chat, a reporter in one instance, and then his wife, his brother, and many others on another. On a Signal app, how does that work exactly? Is it easy to invite other people? Is it hard to do this? Talk about that for a moment.
It is easy to invite others, but you have to go out of your way to bring them into the conversation. So it's just simply navigating through and finding the contacts within the application. Signal is approved for limited use on government devices. We know that was done by the Department of Defense back in 2023. It's just a question of how much information was shared. We have talks about airstrikes bringing in other parties that may not have proper security clearance. That's where things get very muddy.
And Signal you can use, perhaps it's not classified information, but sensitive information can be exchanged on that as well. And there is a difference between classified and sensitive, and that's where I think a lot of times people get stuck.
That's exactly right. I mean, the nature of what you're sharing, that's what it all comes down to. If it's information that belongs on proper, secure government devices, proper, secure government channels, that's what should be done. You shouldn't be sharing that type of information on a commercial app like Signal.
Let's talk about TikTok here for a moment, because these tariffs obviously have a lot of people shaking. TikTok is sitting here saying, wait a minute, some of these people who are selling things are saying, well, we have a way of maybe getting people excited about the things that they're buying, right?
Yeah, all this tariff talk has created an absolute frenzy on TikTok. Manufacturers in China are pleading directly to U.S. consumers. We have all of your luxury goods. We have everything at a fraction of what you've been paying previously. The problem is you don't know if it's going to be counterfeit. You don't know if the quality is going to be good. And finally, you don't know, you're likely going to have to pay tariffs on it coming in, because the minimum exemption, which was $800 and below, before you didn't have to pay tariffs on that. Starting on May 2nd, that goes away. People will have to pay tariffs.
So people are being lured with the cheapest version of something that they think they're getting, but in fact, these may be knockoffs, right? Counterfeits.
They could absolutely be knockoffs, Roop. And the problem is, you go to these sites, and this is a low bar, but they're in Chinese, so you're going to have to translate it first and foremost. Second, don't expect to get any type of return policy or customer service. These organizations don't have any footprints within the United States. If something doesn't fit or if it's not what you expected, you're going to be out the money, and the goods aren't going to do you any good. And finally, if it is a knockoff, it is going to go through a rigorous process at the border. So if the Customs and Border Patrol deem that to be counterfeit, they will seize it, and you'll be out that money and those goods.
So if you spend $200 on a really expensive, what you thought was a Louis Vuitton bag for a lot cheaper, you're going to end up maybe not getting the bag at all.
That's exactly it. We're all looking to save money right now, without question. The problem is, there's nothing worse when you are looking to save money. If you don't get what you were expecting, it's not what you thought you paid for, or if you don't get it at all because it's seized at the border.
Let's talk about TikTok itself for a moment here. The future is always in question, it seems, but the back and forth continues. Where are we now when it comes to that app?
We're in a very interesting holding phase right now. We know that it was pushed off. President Donald Trump extended the deadline on the ban. Now, I do think that TikTok is going to be caught in the middle of this tariff negotiation. I think it will be used as a bargaining chip in some way, shape, or form to be able to reduce tariffs against China. It's going to be interesting to see where all of this falls. We were very close to a deal before all the tariff talk really boiled over. Now that that's happened, it's on pause.
So basically, this could be a chip that could actually help China, perhaps even in this case, yes?
It could go either way, Roop. I think it's going to be a bargaining chip on both sides. China could say, look, if you want us to approve of this, you need to lower the tariffs 100%. And President Donald Trump could also make the same claim as well. We want to keep it. We want to continue driving revenue, and users, 170 million U.S. users across the country, will lower tariffs if we can keep it in the country.
And they bought some time with a few months, but basically we're going to be hearing about this come this summer again.
Exactly. The sand is going through the hourglass as we speak.
And as it does, we'll continue to check with you about all of these latest developments when it comes to technology and cyber risk. We thank you for your time. David Darajotis, always good to see you.
Thank you, Roop.
Thanks for being with us on The Pulse tonight. And that is The Pulse for tonight. We thank you for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, we'll see you tomorrow night.